Welcome to the Exodus Companies podcast. My name is Jared. I am the CEO and founder of the Exodus Companies. This is a movement from culture to build community. I sat down wrestling with how I could possibly begin what is the first episode of the Exodus Companies podcast. And to be honest with all of you, this was much more difficult than what I had expected. Not because I don't really know what to say, but because I truly believe that what we have started is the destiny of not only myself, but many of those around me. When people look back on my life after I'm gone, they will remember the Exodus Companies. Exodus 2022. What I decided to do was start this podcast off with a story. You see, stories have driven civilization forward for centuries. Experiences passed down generation after generation have guided and built civilizations, taught principles and values, and have created culture. Culture, the collective, the values, the ethics. One people, one culture. I sit back and wonder, where is our culture? I have lived long enough to see and realize the degradation that is within our nation. I see the struggle and the pain of those around us. I see the constant barrage of those who wish and beg for chaos, and I'm determined to not allow this to happen. And the story begins. 2012 through 2014 were years of trial for me. I started on the exact path that society tells most young men to follow. Go to college, get a degree, learn a skill, work for a company, plan to stay there for maybe 40 years, retire at 65. And then finally at 65, you get to live life. And I started this exact journey as I graduated college and began working. What I realized through that process was the massive lie society tells us. We are meant for so much more, yet our world tells us, settle into our routines, stay in our lanes, and follow the path. Just be content. While I am grateful for the time spent learning and refining myself after college, I had a longing for something much, much deeper. I felt the weight of the world as we began what would soon become my first business. I despised my current career, woke up miserable each day, but I followed the path. Be content, do the job, don't complain, provide at all costs, even if it costs me my happiness. 2015 was the official start of my first business, TA Targets. Now, I would be lying if I said that all was as it should be. What I never realized in a million years was how difficult, no, trying and crippling starting my business would be. The best things that we experience often come at the cost of great sacrifice. I was a young man, not sure of his path or direction, now tasked with growing this small ember of a company, stoking and building it to a flame which eventually would impact tens of thousands of people. I could have never imagined what this ember would become. And 2015 was hard because the entrepreneur and freedom lover inside of me felt turmoil and pain. Although I knew I wanted something more, I had zero idea of how to get myself there. I found myself full of fear and stress and doubt. Doubt weighs heavy on our souls. It drives us into the darkest places of our minds. It creates a false image that we eventually come to believe. Then the echoes of those around us with false cheers and compliments of how good we're doing come into the picture. And I believed that I wasn't good enough. I believed that I would never make it out. I struggled balancing my day job with building my business. I was a new father, a husband, a bound protector and defender and provider for my family, barely making enough money to get by. Unsure of exactly what my definition was or even what my business was about. I became isolated in my own mind, spinning, racing, chasing, building, creating, dreaming, and believing. Then I would crash into the next wave of doubt, fear, and uncertainty. In 2016 through 2017 was a period of awakening for me, and the result was a much more refined purpose for my business and then ultimately myself. See, I set out building my business with my company and team being the center of the story. I wrote post after post about how much better our team was, our company was, and how good our product was. I played the game, putting out content, trying to build a brand, and on many levels, I would honestly say that we succeeded. More and more people began purchasing our products. More and more people recognized our brand. Our company was maturing, or at least that's what I thought. And I am certain that almost all entrepreneurs face the same things that I felt during that period. Tasked with the impossible, the only option is creativity, but also balancing risk. What really made me wake up was realizing that I was not qualified to lead or build my business. This realization sparked my soul, ignited a fire, and lit an ember that cast me into a rapidly changing new world of my journey. It's a powerful moment when you realize that you need help and that you're not going to be able to make it on your own. So I decided to do two things. I reached out to people who I believed were ahead of where I am currently, people who were where I wanted to be, and I decided to start reading religiously. Now, we've all seen the corny influencers popping up and propping reading as if simply reading words on a paper will solve all of your problems. And I have news for you. It's not going to. I could have read a book a day for a millennium and it would not have solved the stirring and turmoil in my soul. Purpose is our calling and destiny is our driving force. We are called to live for more than just normal. Battle after battle within my business journey, I lost, or at least I felt that I had lost. But I would reach out to another person, ask them for an hour or two of their time, and they would oblige. They would offer me advice and counsel and direction. And then what I did was put in the work and apply their skill set, learn from their experience, and I started to see more progress. The progress I deeply desired started happening between 2018 and 2019. And that period of time brought so much growth. It was slow, hard, and consistent. But we passed milestones with our team that honestly many small business owners would dream of. We hired our first employees. I began to lead and began to be noticed. And then the vicious, tiresome cycle continued. More failure, more learning, more trials, some small wins, but many very difficult situations and decisions. We hired our first employee, then our second, and I began to realize how little I knew about team building, how little I knew about culture. Many hard situations kept my sleep to a minimum while I wrestled with myself, my destiny, and whether or not I was even on the right path at all. What kept me going through 2019 and all the trials that came with that year was simply my belief in the mission of our company. The irony is I hadn't even begun to understand my mission. To that date, our company's slogan said nothing about culture, said nothing about communities. It was, let's make a great product, speak about it, sell it, and grow the business. And then something radical happened. Spring of 2020 reared its ugly head, and just when I thought that I was getting some breathing room in my own journey, we started to see our society, our communities, and our culture collapsing before our very eyes. And something was not right, and our culture was very, very messed up. Our culture was under attack in a way that I had never seen before in our nation. Forced shutdowns, mandates, fear, constant barrages from media, relentless news stories discussing death and destruction. We constantly had authoritarian propaganda shoved down our throats. And I watched as politicians and leaders antagonized violence. I saw through the smoke very quickly. July 4th, 2020, I burned a mask in protest to this new authoritarian shift, and I was absolutely ridiculed. This was the first post on social media that ever led to death threats. People wished me dead because I believed differently, but I saw the truth clearly. Those who threatened me were the ones who were lost. And this reality painted a very clear picture for me. Our culture was dying. Since the early 1900s, progressive ideology and New Deals have led to the destabilization and collapse of what used to be known as American culture. Culture is about the collective, and if we cannot agree on certain principles, then we cannot be a nation. How can we thrive as people if we cannot even agree that liberty is sacred? How can we be one when the media constantly tells us that we must hate our neighbor? How can we ever experience the fruits of this nation when so many seek to undermine it? In 2020, my business was viewed as non-essential. In 2020, my views were radical. In 2020, I saw families torn apart by different beliefs. In 2020, I saw just how vile and evil the media is. They suppressed the truth, they lied, they cheated, they stole our freedom, they hid actual treatments that resulted in the deaths of so many people. Blood was and is on their hands. Yet in many ways, we gave up so freely and easily. What could possibly be left of our culture? Fragments, nothing more. My business stayed open and we stayed fighting. TA targets grew substantially through the 2020 year, and heading into 2021, I began to realize just how important our mission was. I recognized a radical shift. Our company can no longer be just about making and selling products. Our company needs to speak truth and address culture, lead and influence. And in 2021, we decided to start our YouTube channel. Well, at least I should say we started taking it seriously. We went from around 100 subscribers to just under 20,000 that summer. Most of our videos addressed training and culture and other topics surrounding regular people. We refined our core mission to reflect our desire to change culture, to lead and influence our nation. TA Targets began to embrace our core mission, equip citizens with modern fighting tools to become better prepared to defend their communities. We spoke the message that our products built up defenders of our communities. Our focus was community, speaking truth, and going on the offensive, securing our rights and investing in the future of this nation. And a new weight was placed on my shoulders. How can a steel target company possibly change culture? How can we raise a tribe that is ready to fight to remain free, to defend innocent lives and speak truth? We are, after all, just another steel target company. I had a recurring dream, this flash of a vision. It returned to my mind time and time again, and I kept hearing the words Exodus. And I know that when you're listening to this podcast, you're probably going to think I'm crazy. You probably think this is strange, and you probably won't even believe me. But I truly believe that in that moment, in those words, God revealed my destiny to me in that moment. You will build the Exodus companies. I will build the Exodus companies. And I grabbed my notebook, I went out to my home office, and I spent around 6 hours writing. And what resulted from those hours was a layout for a new collective of companies, each targeting a segment of our population. Each brand speaking its mission differently and impacting people differently. I presented the idea within a few days to my business partners, and we knew that this was our path. I remember reading my Bible, and I looked up Exodus 20:22, just for fun. I wanted to see if there was some providence here. And Exodus 20:22 states, "And the Lord said to Moses, thus you shall say to the people of Israel, you have seen for yourselves that I have talked with you from heaven." The Exodus of 2022, starting now, here. A small team, but mighty in calling. What a powerful realization this was. And look, I understand you might not be a Christian, you may not believe in God. And to be honest, this podcast isn't about convincing you to believe in our faith, but the alignment of my dreams that evening in my home and working in my home office and the scripture that I read made this extremely clear to me. Our culture is dying, and the only acceptable solution, in my opinion, is an exodus from culture with the objective to build a new community. And it does remind me of one Bible story where Israel was freed from Egypt. And at times, our people must refuse compliance with culture, pick up, and physically leave. Sometimes the most notable action is to refuse being complicit in a broken and weak culture. Sometimes it is a physical movement, often a spiritual. It is no accident that this is the call to action for the Exodus companies. So now we are here together on this podcast. The story I've told you is just one chapter in what I know will become a saving step in our culture. We will lead by example. We will speak the truth at all costs. We will stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. We will reject the bastardization of our culture and our republic. We will refocus our energy and message to our communities. We will build safe havens for true liberty to thrive. We will connect leaders to listeners and speak into this culture. We will put off the division of our nation. We will seek accountability to those who pillage our nation. We will encourage leaders to rise and join the mission. The Exodus Companies is a collective that will connect leaders of culture to all of our people in our community. TA Targets exists to encourage training with modern weapons of war in the hands of regular citizens. Our Cane Co. equips regular citizens with fighting gear to defend themselves from attackers and tyrants. Our Cane Co. is the teeth of our collective. Lantern exists to encourage natural experiences and oneness with the natural world. This is an exodus to nature, to reconnect, to recharge in our natural world. Exodus Overland exists to encourage movement and exploration of our world. Each of our brands fulfilling our mission: reach people, build community, rebuild culture, refocus on our nation, our people, and our values. Through our collective, we will speak the message of freedom and community to the ends of the earth. This podcast is in opposition to the divisive tactics used by major media to silence us and keep us addicted and obedient. Powerful individuals desire for each of us to oppose each other rather than embrace each other. This podcast is a calling to all of those who love their neighbors. This podcast is a calling for all of those who love our nation. This podcast is a calling for men to step up. This podcast is a calling for those who seek truth and justice. This podcast is a threat to anyone who undermines our nation, because through our collective power, we hold the ability to bring justice and accountability to our culture. We will not forget the abuses that have been made. We will lead a movement to rebuild culture. This is the Exodus. Now that you all have an overview of what brought us to this point, I wanted to share what this podcast will consist of. One of the biggest ways that I believe my team can help is showing you all that your voice is not the minority. The media and woke mob have effectively convinced us that we are the minority, or worse, they'll convince us to accept the term silent majority. We can no longer afford to be silent. Now, I know this is uncomfortable for many of us. At the end of the day, most of us simply want to be left alone. We don't want or desire to control other people at all. With that being said, we cannot afford to sit quietly any longer. On the podcast, you can expect a few different show formats. The first one, I plan to do as many long-form episodes where I interview my circle of friends and their friends to discuss culture and what we can do as Americans to correct it. I have access to many professionals and highly gifted individuals. We will bring them on the show, learn about them and how they succeeded, and get their take on the state of our culture. We will call these shows Speaking to Culture. Number 2, the next format will be introducing you all to our team. Each of our team members desires to be experts in certain fields, from growing our own food to building our own products, designing, and much, much more. We will bring topics to you that we feel you will find valuable, and I will discuss them in a format that I will call Becoming an Asset. Number 3, the next format that we will be discussing is relevant topics that are currently going on in our nation's news cycle. We will discuss the headlines, dive into the situations, and discuss what we think is the larger play. These episodes will be called Headline Hunting. Lastly, we will do Exodus Q&As where there will be questions that you can submit. We will provide all of the information in the very near future of how you can provide, or submit, I should say, those questions to us. We will pick a handful of questions in this format for each episode, and I will answer them to the best of my ability on each episode. This is an opportunity to bring solutions to the table to make real change in our nation. We need to create plans to take back our culture. We can complain or we can act, and this podcast is about action. Welcome, guys, to the Exodus Companies podcast. I'm glad you're here. Welcome to the new Exodus. If you would like to support the Exodus Companies, please remember to subscribe to our podcast and YouTube. If you found this podcast helpful or you learned something new from it, please consider sharing it with your friends or family. We build the Exodus by building our tribe. Join us, become a part of the new culture, the Exodus Companies.